Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello, this is Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Welcome to this week's podcast. On Saturday, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar discussed the main challenges facing agriculture with Deputy News Editor Katrina Morrissey at the IVERC show.
What are your priorities for farmers? You're in an area today where farming is very important and the agriculture sector will be affected by both Brexit and the Common Agricultural Policy. So what are your priorities for farmers?
Well, I suppose for farming there'd be three key priorities. The first of all is getting as good a result or as good an outcome from Brexit as possible. Ideally retaining barrier-free trade between Britain and Ireland, which is so important because so much of our exports, particularly beef but other areas as well, go to the British market. The second is retaining the structure of the CAP largely as it stands. There will be a renegotiation of the CAP around 2020 and it's important, I believe, that we hold firm to those principles that I mentioned earlier, supporting family farming, supporting high quality environmental standards, animal health standards and other issues, and making sure there's adequate funding in the CAP budget for the next round of budget negotiations. That is going to be important because Britain leaving will leave Britain's highest hole in the budget, and we're going to need to deal with that. And the third, really picking up on what I announced in Canada, is expanding Ireland's global presence around the world. Even if Brexit wasn't happening, we should diversify our markets. Britain is our nearest neighbour, but it's by no means the only country in the world, and we need to make sure that we get our products, our high quality agricultural and food products, into other markets. And one of the things that I announced in Toronto, which we're now going to follow through on, is doubling our international footprint, and that includes Board B as well, and making sure that we open more markets to quality Irish products and that more countries know about it.
And if I could just ask you one more, you mentioned with the budget upcoming, is there going to be anything there to protect farmers and agri-food businesses from the effects of sterling-euro changes?
Well, like I said, the budget's not announced yet, and we're still discussing what the package is going to be, and I can't really preempt an announcement, and especially at a time when no decisions are being made. But you recall in the last budget there was a good package for farmers, both in terms of access to loans, some tax measures, and then things that I brought in from the Department of Social Protection, which I was Minister for at the time, such as reversing all the cutbacks to Farm Assist and giving farmers who are self-employed more back for their PRSI. So it's something we're very conscious of and something that will have to be part of the budget mix. Sterling volatility is very difficult. It's not something that's new. We had sterling weakness 8 years ago, long before anyone even imagined Brexit. So it's not something that we haven't had to deal with before. And while there are a lot of businesses that are badly affected by sterling, there are others that benefit. Importers, energy users, for example. And it's difficult to come up with a mechanism that transfers that benefit from those who are gaining from weak sterling to those who are losing it. And that's a tricky thing to do, but it's something that we're very aware of.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Stephen Robb was with Donegal tillage farmer Jamie Rankin to discuss how Harvest 2017 has been going so far.
We're all tillage here, so we grow about 300 acres of cereals and then do about a further 150 contract work for an uncle and his brother. We do about 280 acres of potatoes, and that's our primary business.
I suppose so far, how would you say the harvest is going for yourself, or how much have you got harvested thus far?
We've all winter barley tidied up. Winter barley looked fantastic, was a little disappointing when it came to combining. Good straw yields. We poorest field at about 3.2 tonne and the best was 3.8. All got at exceptionally low moistures up here. We ranged anywhere from 14 to 19%, which is nearly unheard of.
You said the yields didn't really live up to expectation. That's been a common theme throughout the entire country. I mean, it's been a powerful season for crops, so it has, but yet the winter barley in particular didn't perform. What do you think that's down to?
I don't know. The head numbers were there, head length was there. Very difficult to put a finger on it. Some of ours went down, so it did, which didn't help. Infinity was very disappointing. We should have known not to plant anything that is bred off retriever, because our ground's a wee bit too strong for it. Tower had the best results and most consistent again, and Cassia. It's very hard to pinpoint, although whether it got enough early sun could be the one. The sun was generally in July, so it was, and it may have just been that the crop didn't get enough to fill out the way that you'd expected it to.
Have you seen the high demand for straw, which we're kind of seeing around the country? Are you experiencing this on the farm as well?
Yes, definitely. Demand for straws, we can't keep up, so we can't. We're working with our usual customers, but there's a lot of extra people looking for straw this year. So there is. And
all the straw is gathered up, it's all baled, it's saved.
Oh, it's been a great harvest. So it has. Everything's been straightforward so far. All straw's got in good condition, all cleared off the fields, and fields are cleared and ready for ploughing. And
right, and I see you had winter oilseed rape as well. Do you want to comment a little bit about how that did?
Well, the oilseed rape's been a highlight of this year's harvest so far. We had Elysian, and we had 10.6 hectares. The first 5.6 hectares did 5.5 tonne a hectare, and the second one did just 5 tonne on the button, basically, which is exceptional. I'm really, really pleased with it, and a good straw yield on top of that. So no, it has really been the highlight of this year's harvest.
So you'd have no hesitations about maintaining or even increasing winter oilseed rape acreage next year?
Yeah, the only one is the risk of shedding. Really like Elysian as a variety, although it does seem a wee bit prone to pod shatter. I don't know if that's correct in the breeder's mind or not, but it's from what we're seeing up here. And August is a very, very catchy month for us. So I don't know whether you try and push something that you can get out late July, whenever you're kind of more guaranteed a wee bit of weather. But no, we'll stick in around that same 10 to 15 hectares, and depending on rotation. So it does. So we're only growing rape 1 and 7. So we are, and potatoes is other break crop, which is 1 and 7 as well. So that means there's a good spread.
Okay, and now moving on to the remainder of the harvest. I believe you still have winter wheat, spring barley and spring oats left to cut. So how are the crops looking? How have they performed so far?
Well, wheat looks good. We have both Diego and Lillian. Couldn't really pick one at the minute. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the combine, but wheats look really well. We put a second ear wash on it, which has really stood at the moment because we're so late getting in the harvest. It was very cheap and cheerful, and a bit of stuff was sitting in store, but it's really kept its colour. But we really would like to get a cut this weekend if possible.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I have noticed a small little bit about we'll say kind of late fusarium kicking in wheat, any crops that are still remaining, but obviously you haven't seen this at all.
The wheat seems very clear of fusarium now. We've been very pleased this year. Seemed to went quite early with the first ear wash, and that was kind of the reason. The crops were very green and looking well and had potential, so that was the reason for putting on something fairly cheap and cheerful, as I said, and just to carry it on.
And for the spring barley, how is it coming along? How's the season been so far?
Spring barley's never had a season like it up here. It's got in, got going, and the nice seed beds, good thick crops. Again, it's just about standing. So it is, but it's survived some fairly heavy deluges of rain. Surprising, all our spring barley is planted. A fair wee bit of disease coming into it late on. Wasn't worth spraying for, but kind of whenever you're using 2 SDHIs on it, you would hope to be a wee bit cleaner, which
I mean, that's probably just down to, I suppose, more so the weather. It's mild, it's humid, it is damp up here.
Last week we had 6 blight warnings, so we did out of 7 days, so it just shows
the pressure's pretty high, so it is. Yep. And how soon do you expect to be harvesting the spring barley?
Spring barley, any wee green areas or headlands will be burned off this week, so I would expect to be in spring barley in 10 days time or so.
And as for the spring oats, how have they been performing this season so far? Spring
oats look good, so they do have the same thing, looked well all season. We've hit them quite hard with growth regulator this year, which has kept them standing and low. But no, the oats look to have potential as well now. All spring crops look nice, so they do.
So, in terms of field operations, have you planted any cover crops this year so far, or have you indeed planted any oilseed rape? Or
we have 10 hectares of cover crops in so far after winter barley, which is destined for potatoes. There's about another 15 to 20 hectares of cover crops to go in. Some of it's got in after spring barley, and some of it just is waiting to get a drain in it before it goes in to get that work tidied up. That will hopefully be done early next week, barring the spring barley. Rape ground is all this ready to get glyphosate and then hopefully drilled this weekend, which is quite nice timing. We find any earlier crops can get very ramp going into, because we're very mild. We don't tend to get colder winters, or growth doesn't tend to stop. It tends to just, we get 14 degrees 12 months a year, and things keep growing slowly.
Just going back to your cover crops, Jamie, do you want to just chat a little bit about the mix that you're using and maybe even establishment methods?
Yep. We've tried several different methods. This year we bought a very, very old Moore Unidrill and have been using it. We're having several issues with, as things have progressed, we used to predominantly use oats as a cover crop, so it's basically just a green manure for overwinter for potatoes. Now we've looked into adding a few different vetches and tillage radish and things into. We want to stay away from anything linked to brassica, but just doing wee bits of these. Our still aim is to keep it very cheap and cheerful, so oats is still predominantly the choice, or as a cover crop, and then just bulk it out with a wee bit, use other cover crops and then bulk it out with a wee bit of oats. So it is, but with all the different seed sizes we couldn't spin it on because it wouldn't spin evenly. So, and we had used the Sumo with the rape kit, but we were putting on too high rates and she couldn't spread it evenly, so you were getting it lumped out.
Yes.
And then it wasn't, it was alright, but it wasn't tidy. So we came across a very old Moore Unidrill, as we said, and my dad loves it because it only has a ram that lifts it up and down, and it's the one thing he likes. There's no control box or anything else, so he just goes out and sows, and that's great. But we're going to see how it goes. But funny, we've a nice establishment there now. It's just coming through the ground, and we're fairly well pleased so far.
Very good, very good. So I suppose to finish up, most of our listeners will be fairly aware of the deluge of weather which we experienced last Tuesday, the 22nd of August. I think here in the farm you said you experienced about 55 mil. Yeah. Just what's ground conditions like out there? What's soil trafficability like?
The ground conditions are still very good. It's very, very surprising now. We're out disking there this morning, and after oilseed rape, and it's in good shape. Hoping to start ploughing later on today for winter barley. And no, it's been surprising. Even with all that rain, we were on spraying 2 days later. No messes, no hassle, and we were lifting the first of the spuds of the weekend and coming out with 10 boxes, and there wasn't no marking at all now. Okay. There's wee bits of water lying in hollows, but nothing to worry about.
Okay. Well, Jimmy, thank you very much for allowing us on your farm. For anyone who's interested, they can follow Jimmy on Twitter at Cloon, CLOON potato, and you can follow his progress with the harvest. Thanks, Jimmy.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
I was at a recent meeting in Kelfinora in County Clare between farmers participating in the Burn programme. There I met suckler farmer Raymond Linan and academic James Moran from IT Sligo to discuss the future of the scheme. Everyone really looks up to the Burn as the example of the local agri-environmental schemes that we'll have in the future, and yet today you seem to put everything back on the drawing board. What's happening?
Well, in a way, we can never be static. We always have to be continuously and evolving and adapting to new challenges. And in the Burn, we might have one of the European leading agri-environmental schemes, but CAP reform will be taking place over the next number of years. The regulatory landscape is constantly changing. Farm markets are constantly changing. So we have to respond to that change, have a clear vision for where we want to go, and come up with new solutions on a constant basis. That's what we're here today.
Raymond, the farmer's view, we talked about some of the challenges here, and you mentioned the next generation. What do you see happening around you?
Well, the problem is to kind of get the next generation interested in it, and a big problem is the declining number of young farmers in the Burn, in that certain areas there's no young farmer to take over in the area. And having been involved in education myself and also involved in farming, the income from farming is not adequate. In other words, it is not, shall we say, measuring up to the average industrial wage that is available to those that are going into work in factories in Galway or working elsewhere. That is a huge problem. We are dealing with a declining price for the commodity which we are producing, and we're also got to contend with the rising costs associated with farming, the rising cost of fertiliser. A further problem would be the single farm payment, or the basic, which has now become the basic farm payment. That we find that is being reduced each year. We are told, shall we say, that this is a linear reduction. We as farmers dealing with higher costs find it hard to contend with this. Also, the value of our produce, cattle, we find that a lot of the profits are not coming back to the farming community. As a result, some young farmers are voting with their feet. They are going into work in Galway, Boston Scientific, and those areas. So it is a big problem to persuade the next generation of young farmers to remain on farming in the Burn and to act as trustees of the landscape, the beautiful landscape that is there. And when we realise that farming started in the Burn, and the evidence of this is in Powell na Brone, we wonder what the next generation will hold.
James, that was discussed today. Is it something you can address with this type of programs that we've seen in the Burn, really bringing more people back in?
Yeah, one of the main things we addressed today was the income challenge, but also the succession challenge. And both of them are interlinked. We want the farming in the future and managing the land to be more attractive to the young person. And we need new solutions to make this happen. The farmer, and particularly the young farmer, needs to be esteemed and have a sense of pride and be sort of held up there by the rest of the community as a service provider of the highest quality. And I think that's one of the things that the Burn programme does from the very start. It brings together the local community, the farmers, the state agencies to come up with new, innovative ways of doing things. And as was pointed out here in the closing remarks, if somebody had told us 15 years ago that farmers would have been paid for biodiversity, they would have been laughed out the door. That is the reality here in the Burn today. People are being paid for biodiversity, they're being paid for their food product. But is there now going to be, in 20 years' time, more opportunities for young people and young farmers who want to take over? Maybe the tourism, marketing, service provision. We realise in an area like the Burn, there's a huge amount of tourists, huge amount of revenue passing through this area. How can some of that be harnessed to enhance the opportunities for young people so that young people will be farming this area in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time? It's the big thing we were dealing with today.
James and Raymond, thank you very much. We'll be looking forward and see what happens next. Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
And we'll be back live from Wednesday's liquid milk protest after this break.
Farmer anger over beef prices. For more in this week's Farmers Journal, here's Paul Mooney.
Factories dumping sterling problems on farmers. Turkey wants more Irish cattle in our weanling series. Stress-free weaning on your farm.
And in Irish country living, ahead of the All-Ireland final, hurling legends Sylvie Linan, Noel Lane, Ken McGrath, Paul Flynn and many more give their predictions. Plus, find out how you can get a free ticket to this year's Ploughing inside today's Irish Farmers Journal.
IFA President Joe Healy and the chair of the IFA's National Liquid Milk Committee, John Finn, talked with the Irish Farmers Journal's reporter Alison Sinnott at the IFA protest in County Laois over concerns that retailers are reducing liquid milk prices in their stores and that will hurt farmers.
Well, I think what we see Aldi and Dunn's do here is just a race to the bottom in relation to milk prices. We saw Dunn's lead the way some time back with their offer of 2-3 litre cartons of milk for an average price of 67 cent per litre. That's not sustainable. We've seen Aldi take it a step further and offer the 1 3-litre pack for an average price of 67 cent a litre, or €2 for it. We've seen over the past, give or take 15 years, the number of fresh milk producers in Ireland drop from 3,500 to 1,800. Now, there's a reason why they're doing that, and that's because it's not profitable, and it's because the cost of production to produce fresh milk all year round, Christmas Day included, is costly, and the returns haven't been there. The returns haven't been there because of exactly what Dunn's and Aldi are trying to do. So that's why we're here today, to try and get the likes of Aldi, the likes of Dunn's and the other retailers that might be thinking of following suit, because that's obviously what will happen, to treat their loyal producers with a bit of respect, and to try and ensure a future there for those farmers, and to try and ensure the continuation and the stability of the production and the availability of fresh milk going forward. Fresh milk isn't something you can import. It has to be produced relatively locally, definitely within the country, kept in fridges all the way through, and appear on the shelf within a short space of time. That's what we have here in this country at the moment. That's what we'd like to continue. But what's happening here with Aldi and Dunn's, it's a real show of disrespect to the top quality product that milk is, but also disrespect and to the farmer that's producing it.
Okay, and what has the feedback been like for the farmers then that are here?
The farmers that are here are disgusted with what's happening, because they know that regardless of what Aldi or Dunn's will say when they come out and say that they're bearing the cost of this, look, we all know that eventually all those costs go back onto farmers. When they're doing and trying to sign up their contracts with the co-ops that are suppliers of fresh milk, we have seen a race to the bottom there, where you have one co-op will undercut another co-op because of the pressure they're coming on from the retailer in order to secure that contract. The following year, because the retailer will only offer them a 1-year contract, that means that the following year everyone is back in again, and everyone is undercutting the one that undercut them the previous year. I think you know what I mean. It might sound complicated, but as I say, it's just a race to the bottom. It's not sustainable, and when those contracts and when you have co-ops undercutting each other in order to hold on to contracts, they have to pass what they're losing back to the farmer, and the farmer is the last and the weakest link in the chain. In IFA, we just want to try and defend the farmer and get a bit more fair play from the food chain and from the marketplace for them.
Okay, and do you think that there will be a let up in the prices now after the protest, the liquid milk prices?
Well, look, we met Dunn's last week because every one of the farmers that you see here this morning, they've travelled from all corners of the country to show their support and to show the urgency that this issue is. We met Dunn's on the 16th of August, which is 2 weeks ago, and we highlighted all those issues to them. 2 weeks later, they haven't done anything. I'm again calling on them to act responsibly and to show a bit of loyalty to their very loyal suppliers, i.e. the farmers. And it's very, very disappointing that Aldi have joined the rat race to the bottom as well. And, we would just hope that they will have a rethink about it, and also that the other retailers will not get sucked into this race to the bottom on milk price.
Okay. And will there be further talks like the ones you've had with Dunn's?
We're open to discussing with any of the retailers, sitting down and sitting across the table, because I'm a firm believer that that's the best way to do business. But it's obvious that hasn't worked in this case. We've met all the retailers over the last number of months. Aldi were well aware that we were not happy. We spoke to Aldi about this offer, but they've gone and done it. We spoke to Duns about the offer that they already had. They've continued with it over the last few weeks. So, we have stepped it up a bit here today. We'll have to sit back now and see where we take it from here. But we can't just, take whatever they throw at us lying down. We're not going to do that, and we have to protect an industry that's there. And I think what's very important here is for us to be sure, and for the consumer to be sure, of an adequate supply of fresh milk being on the counter, being on the shelves for them going forward. If farmers are voting with their feet, if the rate of drop in the farmers that are producing fresh milk continues over the next 10 to 15 years like it has in the past 15, well, then we're down to zero farmers. Who's going to supply the fresh milk then? Because there'll be all those fresh milk producers at the moment, they'll be gone into spring calving production, and you won't get fresh milk for Christmas Day from a cow that calved in February or March.
Yeah. So if nothing comes from this down the line, will there be more protests?
Well, we have John Finn here and a number of members from the fresh milk and the liquid milk committee, and they'll just have to take cognizance of what's happening, whether the retailers have been listening to us or not, and if more protests are required, that's what will happen.
Perfect. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Okay.
John, what's the biggest issue been faced at the minute?
Aldi have introduced 3 litres of milk for €2, and it was $2.19. So it's a huge drop in the price of a 3 litre carton of milk. It's down to just about a bit over 66 cents, almost 67 cents a litre. So it's just unsustainable for liquid milk farmers to produce milk that's going to be sold, and the problem is that once one or two are at it, the other retailers will follow suit probably within a short period. Now I suppose Aldi have done this in response to Dunnes stores having 6 litres for €4. Now they have that for some time, and about the 6 litres for €4 is a totally different offering, because very few people will actually buy 6 litres of milk, whereas this Aldi offer is a much more serious offer in our view. And we're just afraid of a liquid milk war, and it's the dairy farmer that's going to lose out in any milk war.
Okay, and what's the mentality like then here today?
Well, I suppose the mentality is that milk is a really healthy product, and we can't be just it can't be sold by the retailers at low cost. And so I think gradually dairy farmers are going to get very angry, especially the milk producers, if milk is being sold below cost.
Okay, so what's the desired outcome then after today?
Well, I suppose the desired outcome is to make the retailers aware that it's a race to the bottom, and the primary producer at the end of the day is the one that produces the milk, and if you lose them, we don't have a liquid milk market, and that's the real problem.
Okay, so then what's the plan here today?
Well, it's just the plan is to just have a protest, so that Duns are aware that what they're doing in the marketplace is having an effect on what the other retailers are going to do, and that comes back to the producers eventually, that they will feel the brunt of it when if other retailers take the same attitude and milk becomes cheaper, there's no margin left for the dairy farmer.
Perfect, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Staying with milk, our dairy editor, Jack Kennedy, asked Owen Larry and Lorcan Allen of the Irish Farmers Journal's agribusiness desk about the importance of the infant formula business to Irish farmers.
We are here to have a chat, I suppose, on the ongoing investigation into infant formula that the Agribiz team have been conducting over the last number of weeks in the Farmers Journal. In last week's article, we saw how Ireland's infant formula exports have quadrupled in value over the last decade to reach a value of 1.3 billion in exports last year. Infant formula now accounts for over 40% of all Irish dairy exports and has been responsible for more than half of the value growth in dairy exports over the last decade. So, I suppose, Lorcan, just to turn to you first, in this week's IFJ we profile who the main companies are in this sector. Can you tell us about who are the main players and I suppose why are they in Ireland?
Yeah, Jack, I suppose in terms of the infant formula market, there are four real big players that control about 70 to 80% of the market. And this is Wyeth, who's owned by Nestle, Danone, Abbott, an American company, and Mead Johnson, also an American company. Now, three of these companies have a processing footprint here in Ireland. Wyeth have a plant down in Askeaton, County Limerick. It's here a long time. Danone have two facilities in Ireland, one in Macroom, County Cork, and another in Wexford. And Abbott have a plant in Coot Hill in Cavan. And I suppose the fourth one, Mead Johnson, it doesn't have a processing footprint here in Ireland, but they have a big plant in the Netherlands that would source a lot of its raw material ingredients from Ireland, from your Kerry Group, your Lakelands or Glanbia.
Before we get on to the farmer side of it, I suppose, and the co-ops, I mean, do we have any idea where this product has been sold, where the majority of this infant formula has been sold?
Yeah, so nearly all the co-ops in Ireland, dairy processors would supply some ingredients or raw materials to these players, for use in infant formula. And the kind of ingredients you're talking about here are your lactose, whey, your skim powder, as well as some smaller ingredients.
And is most of it going to China or is it European?
Most of the Irish ingredients would be manufactured here for infant formula, destined for China ultimately.
Okay, bring it back down to grass level, I suppose, and in terms of what co-ops are supplying ingredients into the four major infant formula players, as you talked about.
From a basic level, you have your Patrick's up and your Lakelands up will be supplying Abbott there on the Cavan Northern Ireland border. Glanbia and Dairygold would have significant ingredients manufacturing facilities, so they would be supplying nearly all of the different infant formula companies with some range of ingredients. So it varies from co-op to co-op, the level of ingredients that they would be supplying to the different companies, but from your Glanbias with the most complex level of ingredients down to your smaller co-ops.
Okay, Owen, maybe just to turn to you, do we have any visibility on the profits made by these multinational companies that are processing infant formula here in Ireland?
Well, Jack, I suppose all these companies are PLC companies. They're massive multinational players. However, it's very difficult to interpret what percentage of their income and their profits are coming from the infant formula section. The one company that reveals the clearest picture around infant formula is Mead Johnson, and I suppose that provides us a kind of the greatest visibility, and we can see that the margins made in this type of business is of the tune of 25%, which is absolutely massive. I suppose to put that in context, the Irish dairy processors would make a typical margin of between 2 and 3%. So it's at a multiple, nearly a 10 times multiple of what the dairy processors would be making. We do have some visibility of the exact amount of profit that some of the companies make in Ireland. However, regarding transfer pricing, it can be difficult, but we would have calculated in our estimations and in our calculations that the profits made from the Irish infant formula and ingredients by these four multinationals would be of the tune of about 320 million euros per year. So that would put it in terms of the Irish processors. If we compare it to that, they make about a combined total profit of about 100 million a year. So it's about 3 to 4 times the level of profits at processing level.
Wow, so I mean they're bigger figures. So effectively, what we've established is, okay, about 10 or 11% of the infant formula that's used in the world originates here in Ireland. Okay, that's the first step. Secondly, you're saying that the companies that are marketing that on a global basis, the Mead Johnsons, the Wyeths that Lorcan talked about, they're making substantial profits. They're making, huge profits, 10 times a multiple of the profits of our kind of indigenous Irish companies. I suppose the key question for farmers listening to this is, are dairy farmers benefiting from having these companies here in Ireland?
Well, first of all, I suppose just to touch off those profits again, it's important to realise that to get to that level of profit, there's huge investment required, and there's huge innovation and research and development that goes on. This is a health-based product. It's a very sensitive infant nutrition product that requires a huge amount of R&D and investment, and that's ongoing. So the profit levels are in the chain. I suppose the question for farmers is, what percentage is a fair percentage for the multinationals to keep, and what's a fair percentage for the farmers to have? And there is a little bit of a unbalance in that if you look at the level of profits being made elsewhere in the chain beyond the farm gate. First of all, these companies, they are located in Ireland simply because we have a high quality, safe, traceable and sustainable grass-based product that they require for the ingredients and to market into the Chinese market, because that's what the consumer's wanting.
Okay.
They are paying a premium for the product over commodity prices. However, the premiums that they have been paying are slipping because of added capacity into the market. So the farmer in Ireland has benefited, no doubt, over time, and the milk price, I suppose, reflects that. So had these companies not been here, the milk price could be in far worse position. However, because the margins are slipping, or the premiums are slipping on the product they're selling to these infant formula companies, the premiums are being eroded, and hence the value that's being added back into the milk price may be slipping as well.
Okay. Is there a solution to that piece? So you're saying that the margin, maybe from 10 years ago to where it is now, is less. So the cooperative or the group of farmers that are selling this product to the multinational, they're getting less for that. The margin is less on that product. Is there a solution to trying to get the farmer share of that premium that we talked about there earlier? Is there a solution to try and get more into the farmer's pocket?
Well, if we take what farmers have done in the past, and that was the butter, they established the Kerrygold brand. Yep. This is a branded play where consumers buy products that they trust. Irish farmers have done this in the past, and I suppose it has been raised in recent times that farmers should look at, or the industry should look at, developing its own infant formula brand. Now, it sounds very idealistic. In reality, it may be difficult to do. As anyone knows, brands require a significant investment. This is a $50 billion market, and were we to even achieve, or to look to achieve 1% of the market, it would require significant investment to the tune of about €2 billion just to build the plant and to invest in the brand. Now, these other players that dominate, having 80% of the market, they're not going to sit idly by. And remember, they are customers of ours as well as an industry. So it's quite a risky one, but definitely it's an area that the industry could look at because of the high margins that are involved.
Okay, good folks. What's coming next week? I suppose this is week 2 of your 3-week series. So maybe, Lorcan, can you maybe just outline what farmers can expect to read next week?
Yeah, I suppose for our 3rd week in the series, we're going to look a little bit more at what can the industry do to get a bit more of that premium. Are we charging enough for commodity, for high quality ingredients? And these companies use the Irish clean, green, sustainable image to market their own products. So maybe there should be something in terms of a reward back to the primary processor for that.
Excellent stuff, lads. Looking forward to it next week.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Finally, in this week's Irish Country Living, Mary Phelan covers the extent of the accommodation crisis for students around the country. Anthony Jordan asked her for advice on finding a place to live during college.
Yes, Anthony. So, Yvonne Mullins, she has just finished her final year in Ag Science and UCD, like yourself. And this year, and for the 2 years previous to that, Yvonne lived in a house where there were a lot of problems. Now, the first of these problems was at one point they had no floor. So the whole foundations of the house were failing. So the ground was sinking, and there were 4 showers in it, but it was on 3-phase electricity. So this was a problem. And what happened was the base of the showers all dropped 2 inches. So anytime you would turn on the shower, the whole room would flood with water. So not surprisingly then, the floorboards started coming up. The floorboards that weren't coming up all started chipping. So they rang the landlord sent someone out to fix it. So a guy came out, he ripped up all the floorboards, and he didn't come back for 6 weeks. So they were left without a floor for 6 weeks. I mean, in a house, a floor is a fairly basic part of the fixings and furnishings. So that's a fairly big problem.
Mould was a problem?
Yeah, so the whole house was black with mould. Yvonne lived there for 3 years. She repainted it herself 3 times. She bleached it, and the mould just kept growing out. She said there was no sense of it leaving. Anytime she painted, it would grow back again. And in second year in particular, she used to go home every weekend, and she'd be absolutely fine. But as soon as she would come back up on a Sunday night, she'd go to bed, wake up Monday morning, and she would have a cold from the damp and mould in the place. Then heating was another problem. So they had a heater crisis at one point. The mains of the water was running over the boiler for the heating, and a valve on the pipe running over broke. So the boiler broke, meaning the heating was gone. She said it was a very cold house. I have lived in these cold student houses. I had one situation myself where the oil ran out, and our landlord wouldn't answer the phone over the Christmas period for 6 weeks. So we weren't able to get the oil filled up, and I know how this feels. So the house was absolutely freezing without heating.
Not everybody had their own bed.
No. So again, in student accommodation or any accommodation, one would expect that a bed would be a fairly basic requirement. So in second and third year, Yvonne did have her own room. But then, so going back into fourth year for academic year starting in September 2016, she says there was too many people looking for houses, so she ended up sharing a bedroom with 2 other people. However, there was only 2 beds between 3 of them, so 2 of them had to share a bed. And Yvonne actually said that this isn't uncommon. She knows of places where there was people in rooms and they didn't even have beds. There was mattresses on the floor because there wasn't actually room for the beds, and then there wasn't room for wardrobes either. So there was stacks of clothes everywhere. So it is painting. Now, Yvonne, to be fair, did have a particularly bad situation. I should really mention the kitchen as well. It was absolutely tiny, apparently. But worse still was the fact that the cooker was right beside the fridge, and if you put on the oven for too long, it used to melt everything in the freezer. I mean, have you ever heard the likes of it?
I suppose on a more positive note, Mary, you also have some kind of advice and tips for students who are planning on getting accommodation in Dublin.
Yes, look, it is extremely difficult to get accommodation in Dublin. It always has been, but it's more difficult now than it ever has been before. Other cities around the country do seem to be, unfortunately, following in the direction of Dublin, where in cities where it used to be quite easy to get accommodation, it's now becoming quite difficult as well. So look, there are some things that you can do that will help you get somewhere to live. So basically, word of mouth is your best friend. Tell absolutely everyone you meet that you're looking for a room, because someone's cousin's brother's uncle will own a house in Dublin and will be looking for someone, and a lot of landlords would rather rent out to someone they know, or they know your family, someone that they can trust. So tell the world and its mother that you're looking for somewhere. Then if you're looking for private accommodation off a website like daft.ie, which many students will be, particularly in Dublin, ring the landlords rather than texting or emailing them, because you have a much better chance of kind of convincing a landlord that you will be a nice person to live in their house if they speak to you over the phone. And then if you do ring up and the place is gone, a lot of landlords might have other properties, so ask if they have rooms available somewhere else, and they might be able to point you in another direction. And then the other thing is, a lot of student houses might have 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms. They tend to be bigger. So if you have a group of 4 or 5 or 6 people already looking together to move into the one place, that could be an advantage for you, because if you ring up a landlord who has a house that sleeps 6 people and you have a group of 6, then it will probably be easier for the landlord to just take you as a group, rather than taking 3 people and then trying to find another 2 and another 1 that will all get on together. So that's some advice. And then also, with the student campus accommodation, get on every single waiting list that you possibly can. Even if you don't get a place for this coming term, there will be students who don't like their course and they will drop out before Christmas, and you could very well end up getting on campus after Christmas. So that's always worth a try as well.
Mary Phelan, thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.